You have spent years explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand you. Years softening your words, qualifying your decisions, apologizing for your choices, shrinking your ambitions into a size that would not make anyone around you uncomfortable. You have sat across from people who looked at your life with confusion or judgment, and instead of walking away, you tried harder. You explained more. You gave more context. You offered more justifications, and every single time you walked away feeling smaller than when you sat down. Friedrich Nietzsche watched this happen, not just in the people around him, but in the entire civilization he lived in. And he spent his life trying to tell you something that almost nobody wanted to hear. Stop. The explaining is not helping you, it is destroying you. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in Prussia. He became a professor of classical philology at the University of Basel at just 24 years old, the youngest appointment of its kind in recorded history. He wrote books that almost nobody read during his lifetime. He was rejected by publishers, misunderstood by colleagues, and abandoned by almost anyone who claimed to know him. He spent his later years in near complete isolation, moving between small rooms in Switzerland and Italy, writing in pain, writing in solitude, writing with the absolute certainty that what he had to say mattered, even if the world of his time was not ready to receive it. And in that solitude, he understood something about explanation, about justification, about the desperate human need to be understood that most people live and die without ever grasping. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, published in 1883, Nietzsche wrote a passage that belongs on the wall of every person who has ever exhausted themselves trying to make the wrong people understand them. He wrote, "Flee, my friend, into your solitude. I see you dazed by the noise of the great men and stung by the stings of the little ones. Forest and rock know well how to be silent with you." And then he said something that cuts even deeper. Where solitude ends, there begins the marketplace. And where the marketplace begins, there begins too the noise of the great actors and the buzzing of poisonous flies. Poisonous flies. That is what Nietzsche called the people who buzz around you with their opinions, their judgments, their unsolicited assessments of your choices and your character. Not enemies, not great opponents worthy of your time and energy. Flies. Small, noisy, insignificant individually, but capable in sufficient numbers of making a person feel as though the whole world is against them. And the mistake, the exhausting, dignity-costing mistake, is not that these people exist, it is that you keep stopping to explain yourself to them. Here is what Nietzsche understood about explanation that most people never figure out. When you explain yourself to someone who does not have the capacity to understand you, you are not having a conversation, you are performing, you are auditioning for approval from a judge who has already made his decision. And no amount of additional information, no amount of careful context, no patient elaboration is going to change that decision, because the problem was never that they did not have enough information. The problem is that your life, your choices, your ambitions, your values, your direction makes them uncomfortable, and you cannot explain away someone else's discomfort. You can only make yourself smaller in the attempt. In Beyond Good and Evil, published in 1886, Nietzsche described what he called the great man, and what he wrote about him should be read slowly. He wrote, "The great man is colder, harder, less hesitating, and without fear of opinion. He lacks the virtues that accompany respect and respectability. If he cannot lead, he goes alone. He is incommunicable."
Incommunicable, not because he is arrogant, not because he considers himself superior in the contemptible sense, but because what he carries inside him, the vision, the values, the depth of his inner life, cannot be transmitted to people who have not done the work to receive it. And the attempt to transmit it anyway, the attempt to explain, to justify, to make legible, does not elevate the listener, it degrades the speaker. Think about the last time you tried to explain a decision to someone who had already judged it. Think about the energy you spent, the words you chose carefully, the examples you offered, the way you watched their face for signs of understanding and found none. Think about how you felt walking away, not lighter, not understood, not vindicated, heavier, because something in you knew, even as you were speaking, that you were wasting something precious, not just time, something more fundamental, the quiet authority that comes from a person who knows what they are doing and does not require an audience to confirm it. Nietzsche called this quality, this self-possession that requires no external validation, the will to power. Not power over others, power over oneself. The capacity to act from one's own values, one's own judgment, one's own inner compass, without needing the crowd to agree. In The Gay Science, published in 1882, he wrote, "I go in solitude so as not to drink out of everybody's cistern. When I am among the many, I live as the many do, and I do not think I really think. After a time, it always seems as if they want to banish me from myself and rob me of my soul." Rob me of my soul. That is what the explaining does. Every time you stand in front of someone who does not deserve your depth and try to make yourself understood, you are handing them access to something that belongs only to you, and they cannot value what they cannot comprehend. So they take a piece of your self-possession and replace it with nothing. Here is where it becomes most uncomfortable. Because the people you keep explaining yourself to are not always strangers. They are often people you love. Family members who look at your choices with confusion. Friends who find the new version of you unsettling. Partners who want the more manageable version of you. And because you love them, you try harder. You explain more. You give more ground. Until one day you realize you have been so busy trying to be understood by everyone else that you have lost the thread back to yourself. In Ecce Homo, written in 1888, the last great work before his mental collapse, Nietzsche wrote about his own life with a clarity that is almost brutal in its honesty. He described the years of rejection, of misunderstanding, of isolation, and he said something that still lands with force more than a century later. He wrote that solitude was not a punishment he endured, but a virtue he chose, a cleansing, a way of protecting the quality of his thinking from the contaminating influence of people who could not meet him where he actually lived. He wrote, "I need solitude, which is to say recovery, return to myself, the breath of a free, light, playful air. Return to myself. That is what stops when you spend all your energy explaining. The return is interrupted. The recovery never happens. You never get back to yourself because you are always out there, among the marketplace, among the flies, trying to be understood by people who were never going to give you what you were looking for." So what is the alternative? Nietzsche was not preaching isolation. He was making a precise distinction between the people who are capable of meeting you genuinely and the people who are not. To the people who can genuinely see you, give everything. Be fully present. Be honest. But to the people who cannot, the marketplace, the flies, give nothing. not cruelty, not contempt, simply the sacred, dignified nothing of a person who knows their inner world is too valuable to be handed to whoever asks loudest. In Daybreak, published in 1881, Nietzsche wrote, "Solitude makes us tougher toward ourselves and tenderer toward others. In both ways it improves our character." Tougher toward ourselves, meaning more honest, more demanding, less willing to accept comfortable lies about who we are and what we are doing. Tenderer toward others, meaning more genuinely capable of real connection, real presence, real love, precisely because we have stopped squandering those capacities on people who cannot receive them. The person who stops explaining themselves does not become cold, they do not become arrogant, they do not disappear into proud isolation and call it strength. What they become is something far rarer. They become someone whose word means something, because when they do speak, when they do share, when they do offer the truth of their inner life, it is not to everyone. It is not to whoever happens to be standing in the marketplace demanding justification. It is to the people who have earned it, by their depth, by their honesty, by their own willingness to be known. Nietzsche's warning is not about arrogance, it is about conservation. The rarest and most valuable thing you possess is not your talent, not your intelligence, not your ambition. It is your clarity about who you are and what you are doing in this life. And that clarity is fragile. It erodes every time you stand in front of someone who cannot understand you and try to make them understand anyway. It erodes in the explaining, in the softening, in the apologizing, in the endless performance of justification for a crowd that is never going to applaud. He wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "No price is too high for the privilege of owning yourself." You have been paying a price. Every explanation you didn't need to give, every apology you didn't owe, every piece of yourself you offered to people who handled it carelessly, that was the price. Nietzsche is not asking you to become unreachable. He is asking you to become selective, to understand that your depth is a resource, that your self-possession is sacred, and the people who deserve your explanation are not the ones demanding it loudest. They are the ones quietly doing the same difficult work of becoming that you are. Everyone else, let them be confused. Your life does not require their understanding to be real.